Hey folks, it's Matt once again, and welcome back to another review. And finally getting to a film I really enjoy, a film I feel is still pretty damn underrated. It's a film that didn't do that well. Well, I mean, it's Exorcist III, of course. And I think it cost about $11 million, but then I know there's a few million because the studio wanted another ending, and it made like what 25, 26 million when it came out, and that's because Exorcist 2 was such a piece of shit that, like, really, after Exorcist 2 you're going to make another one. And William Peter Blatty, who had written of course, The Exorcist, the book that was based on, and he wasn't sure about doing a sequel. Then he had written one called Legion, and of course Exorcist. I already ranted on Exorcist 2, so you know how shitty that movie is. Even without my rant, you know how shitty that movie is. And I'm still not the biggest fan of the first film. Better than the second film, but it's not saying much. This is the Exorcist film I enjoy. This is the one that I love. I still enjoy this film. Gets a 6.3 on IMDb. I think that's way too low. Bare bones DVD. I know there's stuff that was cut out, stuff like that, which I'll get into. It's not like you find a lot of people talking about this film nowadays, which is a shame. And my favorite Exorcist film, and William Peter Blatty, I know he wanted William Friedkin to direct this, but then he lost interest. And then I think William Peter Blatty actually he wanted John Carpenter to direct this. I'm like, wow, John Carpenter. But I think even Carpenter said that he was thinking about it, but, well, it seemed like William Peter Blatty wanted to direct the film himself, which ultimately that's what happened. And I haven't seen the other film he directed, but this film, he did a great job directing. And it's a shame that he didn't get that many jobs of directing, because he did a really great job with this. And I know that there was an original cut, but then stuff was cut out, and the studio was like, well, come on, it's an Exorcist movie, but there's no exorcism at the end. And William Peter Blatty was like, well, there wasn't one in my novel of Legion. And I told you that there wasn't going to be one, and I told you that I wanted to just call it Legion because Exorcist II is such a piece of shit. And of course, if you're going to call it Exorcist III, then people are like, well, wait a minute, where's the exorcism? And, like, William Peter Blatty told the studio, but the studio was tone deaf. But then they had William Peter Blatty add the exorcism at the end, because I think originally it was going to be just a little standoff between George C. Scott, and pretty much he shoots him. George C. Scott shoots him. That's pretty much it. And I know there was a point where William Peter Blatty wanted to get the footage and put into his cut, but apparently the footage is lost, which is too bad. Because I still enjoy this film a lot. I love this movie. I really don't have any problems with it. But I would have been curious to see that. Because I'm a big fan of this, I would have been curious about it. Granted, that curiosity led me to the Cyborg director's cut, which was a piece of shit. But at least I did see it, and I'm like, yep, that was a piece of shit. But I know even a fan didn't edit, but it's really, he just took out a couple scenes, which I haven't seen. But I'm like, if it's just him taking out a couple scenes, it's not really worth my time to see it. But the fact there's not even any special features at all, no making ofs, no documentaries, nothing. It's a real shame. I would have been interested to see, would have been nice to see that lost footage. Would have been nice to see, what William Peter Blatty's original intention was. And I think originally Jason Miller, who pretty much reprises his role from the first movie, he wasn't even going to be in this. But then, so Jason Miller wasn't originally going to be in this, which I'm glad that changed. I'm glad for that. So I think it was going to be just maybe it was strictly going to be Brad Dourif, and then they sort of popped Jason Miller in. I'm glad they did, because I think it worked out much better. Not only in continuity, but I like Jason Miller as an actor. And I thought he did a really good job here in the little bits that we see. But I know I'm jumping all over the place, but Exorcist III is one of those movies that I'm just, you don't see and hear a lot of gushing over. Because I think this film has a great... Here's why I love this film more than the first film. I mean, the first film, that's a film that everyone always talks about. Everyone always gives praise. I was never scared. I was never horrified. I was never creeped out by the original film. I think this film has a better atmosphere. I think it goes at a better pace. Granted, it's a little bit of a shorter film, but I like the story more. I think it's more interesting. I think more stuff happens. I think it's just a more atmospheric movie. It's a more moody movie. You get some really powerhouse performances by George C. Scott and Brad Dourif. Even Ed Flanders and Jason Miller. I really like the score. The score, Barry Dvorak, very subtle, well, at times subtle, but very, at times, creepy, moody score, which helps with the film. And, a few people who like the film, they always talk about how you feel like an evil presence throughout this film. And I thought the director did a really great job. And it shows that even the little things can work. I mean, I'm not always about blood and guts and stuff. I mean, hell, George C. Scott was in another film that I love called The Changeling. And I love The Changeling. And George C. Scott does great in these kind of movies. And that was another one that wasn't gore and guts and stuff. And granted, I love that stuff, but at times I can enjoy stuff like this as well. I mean, the beginning, I like that they have the little bit of the tubular bells, but then it's sort of just mixed in with this very sort of creepy, moody score. And even the way William Peter Blatty shot the sequences where it establishes like the streets, shots of this church and doors and the winds blowing open, and the statue of Jesus just opens his eyes. And it's like these little, like, the first film never got me with his little stuff. Just didn't do it. This one, movies don't scare me, but I do think it can be kind of a creepy, atmospheric movie. I mean, you have statues of Jesus, and his eyes just pop out. There's a scene later on where a cross falls of Jesus, and it's an up-close shot of the Jesus on this cross that fell off the wall, and the closed eyes are bleeding to the floor. There's like a 10-second shot where you see a statue, a religious statue, and on the head is the Joker's face. I'm like, did I just see what I just saw? Is that the Joker? I mean, you have a weird dream sequence, very weird dream sequence where it's like angels and it's like almost like a train station or airport waiting to go somewhere, and you have people like Patrick Ewing and Fabio and Samuel L. Jackson, even though it's not his voice, but he's like a blind man, and it just... watching today is like really interesting, and which I'll probably get into. But you get some really good looking shots. I mean, even in the opening, after some of that stuff that happens, those steps in the first film that Jason Miller's character rolls down, you get a first person POV shot rolling down those stairs. I thought that, wow, how'd they do that shot? But how'd they do that shot without breaking the camera? That's a really interesting shot. And also, I think it interests me because I think it goes at a better pace. I think this story is more intriguing to me. George C. Scott, he's playing the Lieutenant Kinderman, who he was a character in the first film, but that character was barely in the first film. I think Lee J. Cobb was the actor's name, who had passed away by the time this film got made. And this came out in 1990. So once again, 1990 is a year of great movies. You had Jacob's Ladder, which I love Jacob's Ladder. You got the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You got, I think even Tremors came out at the beginning of 1990. You had films like Die Hard 2 and The First Power and Predator 2. You got a great year for movies, in my opinion. But I thought the fact that it was a policeman, this George C. Scott crime scene, this little boy has been killed, and you don't see it, but just the details can make you squirm. And that's what I mean. Even the dialogue in here interests me more than the dialogue in the first film. Like, even just describing, oh yeah, this kid, he had ingots in his eyes, and his head was cut off and replaced with the statue of a Jesus, and the face was done in blackface. And you're just hearing this described, and you're like, you can picture in your head, you're like, wow, that's really fucked up. That's more fucked up than anything. I'm sorry, that's more, just the image of that is more fucked up than a woman going, ah, you know, into her. Maybe that shows just how, you know, my mind works. But also, I think I like the characters. George C. Scott and his buddy, Father Dyer, played by Ed Flanders. Is that Ed Flanders? I want to make sure. I just want to double check my information. You know, some people could be, oh no, you're wrong. What the fuck you doing? Yeah, Ed Flanders is Father Dyer. Yeah. They have some really interesting dialogue. I think because William Peter Blatty wrote this as well. It's like, in a way, they're both kind of smartasses, but they say they'll dialogue so straight and so without cracking a, like, so straight that you're like, are they serious for a second? Like, are they really mad, or they're trying to just, no, they're really like sniping each other, and it's, oh no no, wait a minute, they're really kidding with each other. And I thought Ed Flanders did a great job. He's talking to this other guy, and he's like, well, what do you tell that guy? I said, well, Jesus loves you. Everyone else thinks you're an asshole. I thought that was a nice line. Nice line, if I can not mumble my words. I just like that. Jesus loves you. Everyone else thinks you're an asshole. And he's talking about how he's buddies with George C. Scott's character and how they're going to go off to see It's a Wonderful Life. And he even asked the guy, what's your favorite picture? And the guy's like, The Fly. I thought that was fun. And this is 1990, so I don't know if he's talking about the 50s Fly or the 80s Fly. You could talk about either one. And then George C. Scott, even his dialogue, when he's not with Father Dyer, I don't know, it's just really unique, offbeat. Sort of offbeat characters. I mean, just the dialogue that he give them. Where he's talking about, no, I was signaling beings on Mars. Sometimes they answer. Or like him and Father Dyer talking about how George C. Scott can't go home because there's this carp that his was his mother-in-law or something, you know, bought, and it's in the bathtub swimming for like 3 days, and you know, I hate it. You see how close you are to me? I haven't bathed in 3 days. I can't go home until the carp's asleep, because if I go home and it's swishing back and forth, I'll kill it. Like, you say it so dead straight, but it's meant to be very funny, because you tell Father Dyer is just cracking up. And that's what I mean, it's this really offbeat, unique, interesting dialogue and characters, which helps the movie go along. It keeps me interested, which, I'm sorry, the first film did not do for me. And even their dialogue, where, you know, George C. Scott's talking about, you know, whether God exists or not, and Father Dyer, he says, you wouldn't want to live forever? Yes, I would. You get bored. I have hobbies. I mean, just like George C. Scott says this line, which I thought was a great line. The whole world is a homicide victim. I think that's a great line of dialogue. The whole world is a homicide victim. And I went, I could see his point. But again, that's where Father Dyer asks George C. Scott, and that's where he gives details that it was this kid, it was part of the police boys club. He was 12 years old, and yes, he was a black kid, because the killer drove ingots into his eyes, cut off his head, and that's why the killer put a Jesus head statue where the kid's head was at, and put a black face, like a minstrel. I'm like, wow, that's really fucked up. And this priest getting killed. There's this one priest that gets killed. And I don't know, I just like the way it's directed. You know, the priest is hearing this voice. And like later on when they're taking pictures, when the flash happens, you see that there's blood all over the confessional. Just the way the edits are, just part of me wonders if the edits are because he had to cut stuff out, but at the same time, I kind of like the way it's edited because it just gives this eerie feeling to it. I don't know how to describe it. And again, George C. Scott and the Father Dyer character, I thought they really had a good rapport between each other. When he visits Father Dyer in the hospital, um, George C. Scott says something like, "You make people, you make a lot of people nervous." And Father Dyer's like, "Just sinners." And George C. Scott's like, "No, everyone, everybody." See, this is why I wish I could use footage, because George C. Scott and these guys, they do this better than I could. But because YouTube is such a pussy about copyright, well, this person did. Well, sooner or later, they'll get taken down. Which I guess, makes you to go see the film for yourself. And that's another thing I like about the direction, is that the certain stuff that's revealed, like George C. Scott's walking, when he passes by, boom, here's a reveal of a statue with its head off. Or, of course, later on, you have the nurse sequence, which I'll get into, which I thought was really cool. And some other stuff happens. I mean, I don't want to go to every single detail, but again, you have that weird dream where you have like this globe and the cross drop into darkness, and then you have like all these weird people, and like he sees the little boy. He's like, "I'm sorry that you got murdered." Like, it's just such a weird vibe to it that makes sense because it's a dream. And he even sees his friend, and you're like, "Well, wait a minute, why is your friend there?" And then the next day, see, there's a purpose to this. It's not just random. Just the next day, he gets a call that his friend has died. And just when you find out what happens, that okay, the body is there underneath the sheets, and then there's all these little jars of blood, these like cups, and George C. Scott's like, "What's that?" And the other cops are like, "That's Father Dyer's entire blood supply." And then there's writing on the wall, and when it's revealed, it's a wonderful life, and wonderful with 2 L's. And that's where George C. Scott has another good moment where, yeah, this asshole constantly bickering at him, and then when he goes, "Shut your mouth," and he tears up a bit because his friend just died. It's a good acting performance, but it's not over the top. Some people say it's over the top. I disagree. I mean, it's a big, powerful guy like George C. Scott, but showing his emotions when he can, or when he should, or when he can't hold it back anymore. Some people are like, "You got all that from that?" Yeah, that's how much I love the film. And I mean, pretty much it's him describing about the Gemini killer, this Gemini killer that died about 15 years ago, about how certain things were lied to in the paper, so that if we did a crazy person saying that they're the Gemini killer when they describe something wrong, then okay, next case. And he goes, "Well, this fits the Gemini killer even though he died 15 years ago." And that's why I get intrigued by the story. I'm like, wow, these people are getting killed, and like the entire blood supply, and this one thing here, this kid who died and was replaced by a statue, Jesus head statue that was a blackface, and I don't even need to see it. Just seeing it, and then seeing little images like the statue's eyes popping up, or you have which I know this was added because they wanted the exorcism at the end, which honestly that doesn't bother me, and I'll get to why it doesn't bother me, but to build up at least a teeny bit of this priest that's going to be at the end. His cross that falls off the wall, and like I said, the closed eyes of the cross, bleeding. It's like little stuff like that that I think is pretty interesting. Doesn't always have to be explosions and stuff, but sometimes those can help as well. And even the stuff I find out what the weapon is. Like, he's looking at this thing, and I don't know what it's called, but it's like, they say it's spring activated, so you can open up and it'll close by itself, and it's, I don't know how to describe it, but it's really a crazy-ass murder weapon. And they're like, yeah, that's a new one. And it's a replacement, pretty much, that the old one was taken. And it's just such a crazy thing. And I think there's some good scenes of build-up, suspense. Like when he's talking with this guy, George C. Scott's talking with this guy, mentioning this exorcism that happened 15 years ago, which is the first movie. He hears words, and there's like a little piece of paper fluttering, and goes over here, door jars a little bit. And it's not beating you on the head with music like boom, that sort of over-the-top music that you get in a lot of horror films nowadays. Like whatever the fuck music. Like, they can't even use music. Like, here at least the music is subtle, or just uses the visuals to make, not treat us like a fucking moron like a lot of movies today, especially horror movies do today. And that's where you get the 5-second shot, I swear, of like the Joker's head on the side. I'm like, this is the fucking Joker. What's the Joker doing here? It's weird, but it's interesting. And later, pretty much you find out that the people being killed were involved somehow with the original exorcism. Like, somehow they were involved some way. And it really says a lot that Jason Miller and Brad Dourif really pull it off, because it's maybe an hour or so in when they first appear, but you really feel their presence, especially Brad Dourif. You really do. Because this doctor, which I like the fact that this doctor actually has this paper where he wrote this stuff down. He's like trying to repeat himself so that when he talks to the cop, he's saying everything perfectly. I thought that was kind of interesting, unique touch. Like, he didn't want to stutter in front of this cop, or he didn't want to fuck up in front of this cop. So he has written down what he's going to say. And he's all nervous and stuff. I thought that was kind of a little interesting choice. Even the little things can help. I do feel that way about this patient X, and how he was found wandering around, and then George C. Scott sees him and thinks he might be Father Karras. And again, Jason Miller, from what I understand, was not in the original cut. I don't want to say the original cut, but originally Jason Miller wasn't in it, and I'm glad that they did that, because I like that. It gives more meaning to, okay, here's this innocent person being used by not only the devil, whatever, and thank God no fucking Pazuzu that name is never mentioned or heard, or Kokomo, whatever, which made me think of fucking Cocktail with Tom Cruise. Down in Kokomo, Jamaica. Look back on my Exorcist II rant if you want to know what the hell I'm talking about. Or Pazuzu. Or no, or any of that bullshit. This is how you do it right. Again, I like it more than the first film, because I thought it went at a better pace. I was more intrigued by the characters. I'm more intrigued by the situation. The story's more interesting. The fact that 15 years ago, this Gemini killer was electrocuted, and that the devil, or demon, however you want to call it, made a deal with the killer, sort of a soul of a killer. I'm going to put you in this body. Now it's going to take years for the body to heal up, which shows that there's at least some limit to the power. Otherwise, you're thinking, well, why doesn't it just, blow up the entire building or something? But it shows that there's some limit of power. So years of sort of I think of it, the body fixing itself up. But then at times you see Jason Miller, but then when even more of the Gemini killer's personality, then you see Brad Dourif. Now granted, in George C. Scott's his eyes, he's always seen Jason Miller, but us, we see Brad Dourif. And Jason Miller, I think, did a great job, and Brad Dourif knocked it out of the park. And I think Brad Dourif, unfortunately, thinks that this version of the film is mediocre. I disagree, but granted, I haven't seen the original cut. He probably did, so maybe I'm the one who's missing out because that footage apparently lost. But I still love this version. I don't think this version is mediocre at all. But again, maybe that's because he saw the original version and he saw something we didn't, so maybe that's why. But you know, calling this mediocre, even the I love this version. Even this version, granted, of course, really no one has seen that fan wise. But even then, I'm like, mediocre bull. I'm sorry, I disagree. But I mean, it's his opinion, but I'm just, again, I'm repeating myself. But Brad Dourif's performance knocks it out of the park, and just some of the, I mean, he's got a sick sense of humor, like pretty much describing how he killed Father Dyer, like a catheter, and pumping the blood out, and just acting performances between George C. Scott and Brad Dourif. Those scenes are just great acting to watch. Just wonderful scenes. And Brad Dourif, and I mean, there's even a point where he's talking about how he was dead, and then he got in his body, and there's what was it? That he was obliged to settle a score on behalf of a friend. So I thought, man, that's fucked up that, you know, they're using this priest who had the gall to get us out of this little girl back in the past. We're going to use his body to commit these crimes. I thought, wow, that's definitely evil. And then the fact that this Gemini killer made a deal, like he's obliged to settle the score on behalf of pretty much the devil demon from the first film. But then sometimes he lets me have a little fun. That's where you get that scene with the nurse, which, again, very big build-up. I mean, if you've seen the sequence, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, then you know what? See it for yourself. I'm not going to spoil it. See it for yourself, and I think it's a pretty effective sequence. Sequence, jump scare, however you want to call it. Still very effective. And yeah, Brad Dourif gives a fantastic performance. I'd probably say it's his best performance. I don't want to say favorite character. My favorite character of his will always be Graveyard. Well, actually, I'm going to say Graveyard Shift. That's a personal favorite of mine. But this is, performance-wise, he just really is fantastic in this. But I also like the fact that the Jason Miller's character is still there. Somewhat there. Like, because even a nurse says, there was one time I heard him, he seemed desperate and decent. And he says, you know, save your servant. Did he say anything else? Kill it. And again, I thought it showed that he's still there, but he's being tortured. But then you have a good finale as well. And I liked apparently the finale was just, he went up and shot the guy. George C. Scott went up and shoots the guy. I'm like, I would not have been satisfied with that ending. I'm sorry. When you're watching a big build-up, it's just someone goes up, boom, and then that's it. Again, maybe there's more to it than that, but from what I understand, that's all it was. He walks up, boom. I wouldn't have been satisfied. I've been like, I would have felt that would be anticlimactic. Again, maybe the footage had more to it, but I would have felt that was anticlimactic. But before the ending, I mean, I should mention some of the weird, crazy stuff. I mean, you have where George C. Scott's looking around, you have that woman that's crawling on the ceiling. Really weird sequence. You have someone he loves, you know, family member almost getting killed. You know, the fact that you get the idea that he, throughout the film, you see these old people who are crazy, senile, catatonic, however you want to call it. And that, again, that's another interesting idea, that it can use these people, old friends, as Brad Dourif had said, that he's using them to possess them and do their deeds. And who would ever think it'd be, hey, these old people who can barely move and are crazy and are shriveled. And like has that weird thing that almost gets the neck of one, and it's throwing cops and George C. Scott. I thought that was a pretty effective sequence. I like, granted, I will say the priest character, I think the actor is Nicole Williamson. Nicole Williams. Granted, I would have appreciated a couple more scenes of build-up, but I think that's because it was done after the fact. I probably would appreciate at least a couple more scenes of him to build him up a little bit more as a character. Even if you interject, I mean, they interject a couple, but maybe even a couple more, like 2 or 3 more. But okay, a priest comes in doing this exorcism, and I thought the effects work was well done. The fact that there's all this fire and then this snake around him, and he just pushed back, and like the skin's ripping off, and really good bloody makeup effects. That's some good makeup effects, and I liked seeing that. And he falls to the ground, and George C. Scott gets there. And he's about ready to do what he has to, but he gets flung back. And you have like electricity coming down, the floor opens up, and you have uh, Jason Miller's character in this scene here, which I thought is a good looking sequence. I said before, I like this exorcism more than the exorcism in the first movie. Just first off, this exorcism actually works. The second one, I'll give you the head twisting. That's pretty much all that happens. The head twisting. And the bed levitates. Here I got more interest, maybe just I got more interested in the story and the characters. I like the fact that it took all 3 of these characters. I love George C. Scott's speech, which I'm not going to do it justice, but this I believe in. I believe in death. I believe in disease. I believe in injustice and inhumanity, torture and anger and hate. I believe in murder. I believe in pain. I believe in cruelty and infidelity. I believe in slime and stink and every crawling putrid thing. Every possible ugliness and corruption. You son of a bitch! I believe in you. I didn't do as well as George C. Scott, of course, but I thought, really liked that scene. And I like that he just flung back here, he just flung back to the ceiling. You have the priest guy saying, "Fight him, Damien. Fight him, Karis." I like that he does fight, and he fights back and gets control for a second, so Jason Miller actually does something. I like that. He's just not impassive. It's like, "Bill, shoot me now, shoot me," and shoots him. And then also, it doesn't make you too depressed. It's just like, "We won." You hear a voice of Jason Miller, "We won. Free me, Bill." Or, "Bill, free me." Shoots him. And it ends with at the gravesite of Karis, who is now at peace. So not only do I think this is an effective sequel to the first film, I like this film more. I like the exorcism scene. I like the sequence. I thought George C. Scott did a great job. I thought Brad Dourif knocked it out of the park. I thought Jason Miller was good. Ed Flanders. Nicole Williamson did fine, but he didn't. I will appreciate a couple more scenes. I thought it had a nice feeling of evil throughout the film. Weird images. I mean, the Joker's head on a statue, statue's bleeding, or statue's eyes opening up. Effective sequences like the nurse sequence, which I'll just mention that. You already know what I'm talking about. I thought that's a really effective. How you build suspense in a really fantastic way. And William Peter Blatty, I'm surprised he didn't get too many directing jobs. Like, seriously. More horror films can learn from The Exorcist III on how to build a mood and atmosphere. I thought the score was creepy and moody, as well as the film. Again, George C. Scott did a great job. These killings and the way they're killed and the details. And when I say the way they're killed, just them being described creates a picture in your head. It's like, ooh, shit, that's fucked up. The acting scenes between George C. Scott and Brad Dourif and Jason Miller I thought were well done. Those sequences with Brad Dourif, always a pleasure to watch. Again, the weird dream scene. I mean, everything for me worked in this film. I love this film to death. I have no... Other than maybe a couple more scenes added. I I don't really see the big problem of the exorcism scene. I mean, I'm sorry, I prefer that than he comes up, shoots him, and then it just would seem too anticlimactic for me. I might, if you're building up, you gotta give a little bit more. But yeah, I would have been curious to see what the original was, and who knows, maybe if I saw the original version, I'd be like, okay, I get it now. But who knows? But I don't know what more I can say about it than that. I just love even the little things where, you know, George C. Scott looks and just lights flickering and looks down this creepy looking fucking hallway and you just evils down there. Don't go down there, George C. Scott. You just feel the evils down there. I thought William Peter Blatty I didn't kind of like I mean he didn't direct The Changeling, but kind of how I felt about The Changeling. I thought it was a well directed movie with an interesting story and a great performance by George C. Scott. And this one, I like The Changeling. I probably put this above it because I think the story in The Changeling is interesting. I probably got even a little more interested in this one. They're both damn good movies, and they show that subtlety can work, and that when you get talented people, you can make an effective horror film. And again, I don't really get scared by horror films, but I will say I think this has a great atmosphere, mood, with very solid performances and extremely well directed. And I thought some really snappy dialogue and some memorable images. The crazy woman that's on the ceiling in the same shot that George C. Scott's at. Um, Even some of the bits in the exorcism sequence. Again, I was talking about how the way the film opens. I mean, I love the film. I think it's a miles better film than the first film. And the fact that this film is underrated, it gets, to me, a too low rating on IMDb. I think this film needs to be talked about more. I think this film deserves more praise. The fact it has nothing but a bare bones DVD is a fucking shame. But yet bullshit like Final Exam and New Year's Eve will get these special edition Blu-rays with features. I think it's fucking ridiculous. That's just my opinion. But Exorcist III is my favorite Exorcist film. My favorite film dealing with exorcism, dealing with possession. Unless you count films like The First Power and that kind of stuff, but the exorcism type of movies, which there's been a lot of them, especially lately, they all should learn from this. I really enjoyed Deliverance from Evil though, but there's a lot of other stuff that should learn more from this. But I would say I even like this more than Deliverance from Evil. Like this is my favorite exorcism movie, dealing with that subject. I mean, even that poster I think looks cool, that cover. I mean, hell, there's more mood in that cover than most movies today. William Peter Blatty knew what the hell he was doing. But either way, thanks for watching. Take care, and we will see you later on the next one. Bye-bye.